Okay? How do we beat state censorship? Now, there's a lot of reasons why we should be talking about this, because on YouTube there's so many things you can't talk about. On Twitter there's so many things you can't talk about. Recently, there was the reason why we brought this topic up, because recently we had the 150-year anniversary of this place, and my friend Dust here tells me no Muslims were invited. Okay, even though you're right.
Yeah,
right. So
it's appalling.
Yeah. So even though I would say a large majority of the people here are Muslims anyway, why would they not be invited? It's a bit weird. Okay, so there's censorship in all sorts of ways, right? How do we overcome that? One of the key things I talk about is realizing we do have a lot more power than we realize, but when we give up and say, oh, it's the government controls YouTube, the government controls everything, we give up, that it's not good for your happiness, but also it's not a productive way of moving forward. You have to remember that the government is only a few people. We are the many, but if we want to make things better, we have to point thumbs, i.e., we are the solution to our problems. What's the phrase? I can't remember now. Yeah. So my short version is: how do we overcome state censorship? First of all, we take responsibility and know that we can't talk to each other directly, and the few people who are controlling the different kinds of media, okay, it's our fault for just sitting back and doing nothing, for allowing it. Well, we have got to do something. And the short answer is that the truth destroys falsehood easily. Go for it.
We don't need people to censor bad beliefs, right? About a year or so ago, there was a thing on Amazon where they were no longer going to allow the sale of Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. Right? Now, it's a stupid book. If you read it, you'll see it's the rantings of a deranged person. But what you'll also realise is that it's very easy to refute. So why do we need people to censor and to make the decisions for us as to what we can and cannot be trusted to read? Do they think we're that stupid? Now, I know that there are people who are that stupid, because there are people who believe this nonsense. But the more material out there is for people to critically think, right, between the right and the wrong, the better society will have. Right? No topic should be off limits.
I want to say thank you. We've known each other for years, and I have to say this man, I want to understand the Jewish faith is the go-to here at the park.
Lovely guy, lovely young man.
And all of us in this community here share in that sentiment. You're right. I mean, the Mein Kampf, as I can barely say, should not be censored. But I do believe fundamentally we do need to have a space of education about where it came from. Yes, it should exist, but that shouldn't. It needs to be more around that, where we get people of different communities coming into a forum, and in this forum talking about why this book exists, why it says what it says, and what is the direct result, which has been the direct slaughter of over 6 million Muslims and over 60 million Christians were murdered in an endless war which the Catholic leadership ensued upon the people in Europe. So we need to have that, and we always must never be afraid of asking hard questions and be censored over hard questions or abuse, even when they abuse you or me, because we're asking hard questions.
I think one of the reasons why the state are able to censor us is because we've given up and we're too selfish. Okay, why are we too selfish? Now, I do a tea party, I do a public tea party, and very few people turn up because they don't see the value of sitting. I don't want to be too negative, because I think it's hard to change a culture, but we've been so obsessed with just consuming and doing things to make ourselves happy that we don't focus on, what we don't value is having great conversations with individuals. And when we don't do that, then what we have in between is YouTube, which is controlled by, government, or we have all these other digital media that the government can control. So we have to get to know our neighbours if we want to make things better. Okay? And if we ignore our neighbours, we're going to also not just suffer from state-sponsored censorship, we're also going to suffer from loneliness and 100 other problems. And we're going to still be addicted to material things because we haven't worked on an alternative. And that's what we need to work on. Any thoughts? Do you agree that we're more selfish than we give ourselves credit for?
Absolutely, we're very, very selfish. Human beings like to look out for themselves, right? And that's the way it's always been. But I think a big problem nowadays is that there's been a big philosophy that's been pushed by certain groups of people that has the idea that we are primarily biomass, but it's not true. Concepts are eternal. Are eternal, right? Ideas. Yeah, people think we're just lumps of flesh. It's not true. We've got a consciousness that transcends the body, right? Our consciousness is the most important thing about us, right? Who am I really? Am I this body? No, I'm a consciousness. And only when we realise that we're all consciousnesses, then we will start thinking about what's more important in life. We'll think about transcending just materialism and just our own selfish urges.
Yeah, going like beyond that. Just being a consumer in a capitalistic system. I'm not against capitalism, but I'm against just being a consumer. Yes.
I'm a capitalist.
No, go for it. There's not much else.
Sorry for being silly there. I was just saying I'm definitely against capitalism. And a society does not need capitalism to function or to develop or enterprise in. Let's not forget capitalism helped fund the Nazis. Well, that's probably another discussion for another time, but we definitely should have that discussion. Henry Ford, go and Google Henry Ford and what his activities were, by the way. So more selfish. I just want to contest that sentiment. I'm not saying you're wrong by saying what you just said, gentlemen, but I believe that to be this mindful, this person of greater understanding does require education and freedom to be educated and find a space of education. And if we don't let your people or our people or whoever your people are this freedom to explore themselves, then there's only one, and we force them into a world of austerity and poverty, there is only one logical conclusion, which is baseless capitalism and individualism.
But I disagree with you.
Good.
Okay. So I disagree that we are unable to talk to our neighbours, talk to our communities. We're not, the people that in my neighbourhood, we're not too poor. We're not so poor that we're so hungry that the only thing we can do is find food, and that's the only thing we're thinking about. We've got plenty of money. We're not like filthy rich or something, but we've got enough money to get Netflix and all the other streaming video systems. And instead of talking to neighbours and talking to each other and communicating directly to circumvent these systems that the governments have got in control of, we need to start talking to each other, basically. And so I don't think we should give excuses to not do that or say that we don't have the power. We do have the power. Since we think we don't have the power, that's when we lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. The problems with internet and television are very, very real. They have consumed a huge amount of human time and energy, and it's extremely damaging. And there are some communities that there's a big emphasis on not having easy internet access and having no televisions in the home. It's a much better way to bring up your children. It's a much better way to have a community, right, where people are not just watching whatever it is they're watching all day. Right? What's the point? What's the point? Well, what are you achieving in that time?
So, yes, sorry, my language wasn't as accurate as it should be. When I say poor and poverty, I'm not referring to money. I'm referring to the environment that we live in and what that environment offers you as a human being and the resource. But I think, yes, the internet can be a terrible thing, but again, with a proper education of how we interact with the internet and how we interact with each other and what our responsibilities are, both morally and ethically, and what is regarded as good and bad, as in a form of communication, not what's being communicated. That is a discussion for another time. But that's what I meant by poverty and the poverty environment. To have a world where we can sit around and talk to each other like now, we need a media that doesn't pick on one group because they look a certain way or say a certain religion, believe in a certain religion. So it's not just about the community. I'm not saying that what you're saying doing isn't brilliant and wonderful, but it is in an environment where the Muslims in Europe are targeted and condemned. That diminishes the ability for us to be able to sit around the dinner table or a picnic table or whatever environment we make. It diminishes that, and you're fighting that, and I hope we all are fighting that, because that's what I try to do. Thank you.
So I want to kind of summarize, and I'll be very interested what you think about this, right? So I get my understanding from the religion in the wider sense, and because I know there's so many overlaps between like Islam and Judaism and things like that, so they're very similar ideas. And one idea that I think is really important to keep close is that from the verse of the Quran, it says that falsehood will vanish quickly and truth will overcome it, right? And we shouldn't give up hope or believe that we're always on the back foot. We should realize that falsehood can truth can easily destroy any falsehood. And an example of that, okay, if we communicate not just on social media but directly, is an example of the idea that Muslims and Jews are enemies. For example, so I've got a neighbor who's a Jewish guy. I went to a synagogue the other day, right? And we are incredibly close because we have so many principles that are so aligned, right? And so just having that discussion, and people who don't just watch the news, which is desperately trying to tell us that we're always at each other's throats, right? If we talk to people, we can dispel all this falsehood really easily. What do you think?
I definitely think dialogue definitely helps to build cohesion between different groups of people. But I think the individual is in fact paramount, and it's much more important than the group of people. The group identity that you ascribe to is more important. Like what you're saying, the individual connections that you forge with people in your life. The smile that you give to the person in the street could brighten up their day and lead to a smile given to another person, right?
Fantastic.
Being nice and courteous to other people, being polite, is of lovely things that we're fortunate to live in England, where we have these ideas of politeness. There's so many places in the world that people aren't very polite, right? Here, we've brought up with this culture where we take politeness for granted. We shouldn't take it for granted. We need to realise that when you're courteous to other individuals, you are building connections. You are building people, and that's a much better that's a much better way of looking at society than thinking, okay, I'm a part of this group, and you're part of that group, and that one's part of that group. No, it's the individual is the most important.